He promised to be calm that first night, but her charm was impossible to resist. A pure young woman, a millionaire without control, and everything changed in just one moment. Where are you watching this story from? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because what happened next will surprise you. The scent of magnolias from the Manhattan courtyard drifted through the half-open window, but did nothing to calm Emily's racing heart. Sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands trembled as she held the cup of orange blossom tea the housekeeper had just brought. The delicate white silk dress Michael had personally chosen caressed her skin like a whisper. The choices we make in moments of courage sometimes define an entire lifetime, she thought, contemplating the path that had led her here. 3 months earlier, Emily could never have imagined finding herself in this brownstone with its classic New York facade. At 21, the daughter of a humble vendor at Chelsea Market, she had grown up amid the scent of herbs and the noise of lively negotiations. Her hands knew the hard work of helping her father since she was 12, weighing saffron, packaging artisanal ham, smiling at customers even when fatigue weighed on her delicate shoulders. Michael Davis was the complete opposite, an empire built with an iron fist, contracts signed in glass offices where only numbers mattered. At 38, he owned everything money could buy, his influence extending from New York to Los Angeles. But his heart remained an inaccessible fortress. 5 years earlier, a betrayal had transformed him into a man who controlled every aspect of his life with surgical precision. Their meeting was as unexpected as fate can be. One June afternoon, Michael had returned to his native New York, seeking to reconnect with long-abandoned roots. He had seen her at the market, arranging herb pots with delicate fingers, softly humming a traditional song. A ray of sunlight had streamed through the century-old market windows, illuminating her face and creating a golden halo in her dark hair. The proposal came 2 weeks later, formal and calculated. Emily's father, Mr. Parker, was drowning in debts she was completely unaware of. Michael offered to settle everything in exchange for marriage. Not for love, he specified in that cold professional voice, but for convenience. He needed a wife to appease traditional investors who distrusted single men. She would be well treated, would have everything she desired, but the agreement would end after 1 year. 1 year of your life in exchange for your father's security, he had said, his dark green eyes betraying no emotion. A fair exchange, don't you think? Emily swallowed her fear and accepted, not for money or promises of luxury, but out of love for her father. The ceremony took place in a private room at the Plaza Hotel. She wore a hand-embroidered traditional dress and an American lace veil that had belonged to her grandmother. Michael was impeccable in his black suit, but his eyes showed nothing, just a business deal being concluded. And now, 3 months later, something had changed. The previous night, after a charity dinner at the Metropolitan Museum, Michael had come to her room with an expression she had never seen before. Vulnerable, lost, human. Their lips had met in the dim light, erasing all the barriers they had built. Emily set down her cup, stood up, and approached the mirror. In the reflection, she no longer recognized the young girl from the market. Who was this woman with eyes shining with a new light? The door softly opened behind her. Michael was there, observing her reflection, their gazes meeting in the mirror. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice devoid of its usual coldness. "Did you sleep well?" And so began their true story, woven with threads of silver and gold, of ancient fears and new hopes, in a New York that kept their secrets like a silent confidant. The routine that settled in the following weeks was as fragile as a spider web glistening under morning dew. Michael came home earlier, now sharing his dinners with Emily in the inner courtyard. They talked about everything and nothing, slowly discovering each other's universe. She told him stories from Chelsea Market. He taught her about art, showing her his collection of Warhols and Pollocks he had never really appreciated. That morning, Emily found a midnight blue velvet box on her dressing table. Inside, a necklace of antique pearls accompanied by a handwritten note, "To accompany your light, M." Mrs. Thompson, the housekeeper with a pronounced Boston accent, entered with breakfast and couldn't suppress a smile seeing the gift. "He's never given jewelry to anyone," she commented, setting down the tray. "Not even to... well, never mind." "Not even to whom?" asked Emily, her curiosity piqued. The housekeeper pursed her lips, realizing her mistake. "It's not my place to speak of these things, ma'am." But the damage was done. A shadow had slipped into Emily's mind, a question circling like a bird seeking a place to land. Who was this person Michael had never deemed worthy of receiving pearls? This question found its unexpected answer during the business lunch organized at their home the following day. Michael had invited partners from Chicago, and for the first time, Emily was fully playing her role as hostess. She wore the pearls in a sky-blue dress, guiding the conversation with an ease that surprised even Michael. "Mrs. Davis, you're a breath of fresh air in our circle," commented William Ross, an industrialist with graying temples. So different from Catherine. The silence that fell on the table was as heavy as stone. Michael visibly stiffened, his fingers tightening around his glass of California wine. "Catherine," Emily repeated innocently, feeling she was touching on an essential truth. "My dear, forgive my indiscretion," Ross hastened to say, casting a worried glance toward Michael. "I spoke without thinking." "Catherine Wilson was my business partner," Michael interjected with a cutting voice that tolerated no further questions. "That's in the past." The meal continued in a tense atmosphere. Emily observed Michael, noting his clenched jaw muscles, the way his eyes avoided hers. Business partner. The word seemed to hide much more than a simple professional relationship. That evening, when the guests had left, Emily found him in his study, contemplating the lights of New York through the window, a glass of bourbon in hand. "Who was Catherine, really?" she asked softly, refusing to let this shadow settle between them. Michael remained silent for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, without turning around, "The person who taught me that you can't trust anyone." His voice was distant, as if he were speaking of another time, another life. "She was my partner, my fiancée, my future, until she sold our industrial secrets to our biggest competitor and disappeared with half our fortune." Emily slowly approached, placing a hesitant hand on his shoulder. "I'm not Catherine." Michael finally turned, his eyes darkened by painful memories. "No, you're not her. And that's precisely what frightens me. How can you be afraid of someone who would never hurt you? Because you could hurt me much more than she did," he murmured, raising a hand to brush her cheek. "She only took my money and my trust. You could take something I thought I had lost forever." That night, for the first time, they slept in the same room, but separated by an invisible gulf of unexpressed fears. Emily stared at the ceiling, realizing that the first real obstacle wasn't the contract that bound them, nor their difference in age or background. It was the ghost of a woman she had never met, but who haunted every corner of this house and Michael's heart. The following week was marked by a strange retreat. Michael left earlier, came home later, returning to his old habits like a wounded animal returning to its lair. Shared dinners became rare, conversations dried up. Emily felt him pulling away, rebuilding his walls stone by stone. One morning she decided to explore parts of the house she had never visited. In the west wing, a door that was always closed caught her attention. The key was in the lock, like a silent invitation. Inside, she discovered what appeared to be a woman's office frozen in time. Accounting books, fabric samples, technical drawings. And on the wall, a framed photograph. Michael, smiling as she had never seen him, alongside an elegant woman with piercing eyes and thin lips, sketching an enigmatic smile. "You shouldn't have come in here," said Michael's voice behind her, making her jump. "Why keep intact the office of someone who betrayed you?" asked Emily, turning to him, refusing to apologize. "To remind myself never to make the same mistake again." These words hurt her more than she would have liked to admit. "Which mistake exactly? Loving, trusting?" "Both," he replied tersely. "Love is an illusion we create to make life bearable. Trust is a luxury I can no longer afford." "Then what am I doing here?" Her voice trembled slightly. "If you can neither love nor trust, why did you choose me?" Michael looked away, contemplating the photograph as if seeking an answer in the past. "I thought you'd be different, that you wouldn't ask questions, that you'd accept the terms of the contract without looking for more." "The terms of the contract didn't include falling in love," she murmured. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael approached the window, turning his back on the room, on Emily, on everything that confronted him with his emotions. "I need to leave for Chicago tonight. Urgent business. I'll be gone for a week." "You're running away," Emily observed, tears in her eyes. I'm protecting what's left of me, he replied before leaving the room, leaving her alone with Catherine's ghost. That night, Emily wrote a long letter to her father, describing her confusion, her distress. She didn't mention the shared nights, the moments when Michael had lowered his guard, the instants when she had thought she saw the man behind the fortress. Some secrets were hers to keep. 3 days after Michael's departure, an unexpected visitor presented himself at the door. William Ross, the industrialist who had mentioned Catherine at lunch, asked to see Emily. "Mrs. Davis," he said, bowing slightly when she received him in the small sitting room, "I've come to apologize for my indiscretion the other day." "It's not necessary, Mr. Ross," Emily politely replied. "Yes, it is." He seemed truly contrite. "Michael is a good man who has been through terrible trials. Catherine, she destroyed him methodically. It wasn't just the money or the industrial secrets. She manipulated his feelings for years, making him doubt himself, his judgment." Emily invited him to sit, intrigued by these revelations. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've seen him look at you," Ross said with a sad smile. "I've known Michael for 20 years. He never looked at Catherine the way he looks at you, even at the height of their relationship." "He left," Emily murmured. "He ran away as soon as I started asking questions." "Fear often does more damage than betrayal itself," Ross wisely replied. "Michael isn't afraid of you, Mrs. Davis. He's afraid of what you awaken in him." After Ross's departure, Emily remained motionless for a long time, absorbing his words. For the first time, she truly understood what she was fighting against. Not a ghost, not a contract, but the visceral fear of a man who had learned in the most painful way that love could destroy. That same evening, she made a decision. Crossing the hall to Catherine's office, she opened the windows wide, letting in the fresh New York air. Then, methodically, she began emptying the shelves, organizing the papers, erasing all traces of this woman who now existed only in Michael's pain. When Mrs. Thompson discovered what she was doing, her eyes widened in horror. "Ma'am, Mr. Davis will be furious." "Perhaps," Emily admitted, continuing her work. "Or perhaps he'll finally understand that it's time to live in the present." Michael returned from Chicago a week later, tired but satisfied with his negotiations. The first thing he noticed upon entering the house was the silence. Usually, even when he came home late, he heard Emily humming somewhere, or the light sound of her footsteps on the hardwood floor. But that evening, the house seemed to be holding its breath. "Where is Mrs. Davis?" he asked Mrs. Thompson, who came to welcome him. The housekeeper avoided his gaze. "In the library, sir. She's waiting for you." Intrigued, Michael crossed the corridor to the vast library with walls lined with ancient books. Emily was sitting in an armchair near the fireplace, reading quietly. She looked up at his entrance, her face betraying no emotion. "Welcome back," she said simply, closing her book. There was something different about her, a new confidence that unsettled him. "I closed the deal in Chicago," he announced, trying to fill the uncomfortable silence. "The contract is signed." "Congratulations," she replied with a slight smile. "I've been busy in your absence too." A bad feeling came over him. "What do you mean?" "Follow me," she said, rising. Without waiting for his response, she guided him through the house to the west wing. Michael felt his heart race as he realized where they were heading. When Emily opened the door to Catherine's office, he stopped dead on the threshold. The room was unrecognizable. The dark furniture had disappeared, replaced by lighter pieces. The heavy curtains had given way to light drapes that filtered the light. The accounting books, technical drawings, everything had vanished. And the photograph, it was no longer on the wall. "What have you done?" His voice was barely audible. "I transformed a mausoleum into a studio," Emily calmly replied. "I need a space to create." "You had no right," he murmured, anger rising in him like a wave. "It was for me to decide when." "When what, Michael?" She cut him off. "When to let go of the past. When to stop punishing yourself for a mistake you didn't make. It's been 5 years. How much longer will you let Catherine rule your life?" He stared at her, amazed by her audacity. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," she replied, meeting his gaze. "I understand that you've built your entire life around a betrayal, that you measure every person, every relationship, by the yardstick of your pain. That you prefer to remain a prisoner of the past, rather than risk a new future." "And our arrangement?" he asked, his voice regaining its professional coldness. "Our contract clearly stipulated that you wouldn't interfere in my personal life." Emily approached him, her face inches from his. "Our contract ceased to be purely professional the night you came to my room," she said softly. "You can't have my body and my heart while keeping your soul locked in a cage built by a woman who doesn't even deserve your memory." A heavy silence settled between them. In Michael's eyes, a whirlwind of contradictory emotions. Anger, pain, but also, somewhere deep down, a spark of something that almost looked like relief. "Where are her things?" he finally asked. "In boxes, in the basement. I respected every document, every object. I didn't throw anything away." She paused. "If you want to put them back here, you can. But it will be your conscious choice to continue living with a ghost, not just a habit you've never questioned." Michael slowly walked around the room, brushing his fingertips over the new desk, the empty shelves waiting to be filled with a new story. "And the photograph?" Emily opened a drawer and took out the frame, handing it to him without a word. Michael contemplated it for a long time, as if seeing this image for the first time. Then, with a gesture that seemed to cost him an immense effort, he placed it back in the drawer and closed it. "I need time," he said simply. "I know," Emily replied. "But not another 5 years, okay?" A fleeting smile crossed his face, so brief she thought she had imagined it. "I'll try," he promised before leaving the room. That night, for the first time since his return, they dined together in the inner courtyard. The conversation was hesitant, sometimes awkward, but something had changed. A breach had opened in the wall Michael had erected around his heart, and though tiny, it offered a glimpse of a passage. Autumn settled over New York, transforming Central Park into flaming tableau of gold and red. Emily observed this spectacle from the terrace of an elegant cafe, waiting for Michael for their weekly lunch, a new tradition they had established since their confrontation a month earlier. These last few weeks had brought a subtle but significant change. Michael didn't open up completely, but he was trying. Sometimes she caught him looking at her with an almost vulnerable expression before his usual mask fell back into place. Other times, he shared anecdotes from his childhood in New York, fragments of the man he was before Catherine. "Forgive my lateness," said Michael, suddenly appearing before her. He looked preoccupied, his drawn features betraying a sleepless night. "Is something wrong?" asked Emily, worried. Michael sat down, ordering a strong coffee before answering. "I received a proposal, a major partnership in Seattle." He paused, his fingers nervously tapping the table. "It would be an exceptional opportunity for the company." Emily felt her heart tighten. "You have to leave. For 6 months, minimum." He watched her carefully, gauging her reaction. "I need to make a decision today." The world seemed to suddenly slow around her. 6 months, more than the time remaining in their marriage contract. "When would you leave?" "Next week." He hesitated. "You could come with me." This proposal surprised her. "You want me to accompany you?" Yes." He seemed surprised himself by this admission. "These last few weeks have been different. Better." He looked away, fixing his gaze on the autumn leaves swirling in the air. "But I would understand if you preferred to stay in New York. Your father, the market, your life is here." Emily remained silent, absorbing the impact of this situation. Leaving for Seattle meant leaving everything she knew, but staying in New York while he moved away, this thought was strangely unbearable. "I need to think," she finally said. Lunch proceeded in a tense atmosphere. They talked about everything and nothing, carefully avoiding the subject hovering between them. Returning home, Emily isolated herself in the winter garden, this place that had become her refuge when she needed to think. Her life had changed so quickly in a few months. She, who had never left New York, found herself contemplating a departure for the other side of the country. She, who had never known love, found herself feeling something deep for a man who still battled his own demons. Evening was falling when she heard footsteps behind her. It wasn't Michael, but Mrs. Thompson carrying a letter. "From your father, ma'am," said the housekeeper, handing her the envelope. "And if I may—" "Yes," Emily gently encouraged. "I've served Mr. Davis for 15 years. I've seen him at his best and at his worst. Never have I seen him as alive as since your arrival." She paused. "Whatever you decide, know that you've already accomplished a miracle." Left alone, Emily opened her father's letter. Mr. Parker wrote that his health was improving, that business was picking up well at the market. He also mentioned having met a charming widow who ran a neighboring herb shop. "Life sometimes offers us second chances when we least expect them," he wrote. "Never let fear steal yours." These words resonated with her like an echo of her own thoughts. She now realized she stood at a decisive crossroads. Staying in New York would be the easy, comfortable solution. Going with Michael represented the unknown, the risk, but also the possibility of transforming their arrangement into something real, something deep. That night, when Michael returned late from his office, he found her sitting in the library, an open suitcase in front of her. "You're leaving," he observed, his face instantly closing. "No." She stood up, approaching him. "I'm preparing my things for Seattle, if your offer still stands." A mixture of surprise and relief crossed his face. "Are you sure it won't be easy?" "Nothing worth having ever is," she replied, quoting a phrase her father often repeated. "I have one condition, though." "What is it?" "In Seattle, we start from scratch. No contract, no expiration date, just two people choosing to be together each day." She held his gaze. "I don't want to be your wife on paper anymore. I want to be your partner. Your equal." Michael seemed taken aback by this proposal. He remained silent for so long that Emily thought she had asked the impossible. Then, slowly, he took her hands in his. "I've spent 5 years building walls to protect myself," he said softly. "You've made them tremble in 3 months. I don't know if I can promise to be completely open, completely healed, but I can promise to try. Every day." This response, with its honest vulnerability, was worth more than 1,000 grandiose promises. Emily stood on tiptoe and kissed him gently, sealing this new pact between them. "Seattle," she murmured against his lips, savoring the exoticism of this word, the adventure it promised. "Seattle," he confirmed, his arms closing around her as if to ensure she was real. The Seattle sun was different, more intense, more relentless than that of New York. Emily observed it from the bay window of their apartment, on the 23rd floor of an ultra-modern tower, contemplating the fascinating blend of futuristic skyscrapers and ancient buildings that made up the urban landscape. 3 weeks had passed since their arrival in this vibrant city, where traditions and innovations coexisted harmoniously. Michael was absorbed by his new project, coming home late, his mind still full of figures and strategies. Emily, for her part, explored this new life, learning a few phrases of business jargon from their housekeeper, discovering the colorful markets and lush gardens. That evening, Michael had promised to come home early to take her to dinner. Emily had spent hours getting ready, choosing an emerald green silk dress that complemented her complexion, now slightly tanned by the Pacific Northwest sun. At 8 o'clock, he still wasn't there. Her phone vibrated, displaying a message from Michael. "Meeting running late, don't wait up for dinner, sorry." Disappointment tightened her heart. It was the 3rd time this week. Despite their new understanding, despite his promise to try every day, work still seemed to take precedence. Was it really any different from their life in New York? Refusing to spend another evening alone in this luxurious but impersonal apartment, Emily decided to go out. The concierge recommended a small restaurant in the Pioneer Square district, known for its authenticity. The place was lively, filled with locals who looked at her with curiosity, a New Yorker alone in an establishment traditionally frequented by Seattle families. She settled at a small table, ordering dishes she only knew by name. "You're brave to order the extra spicy seafood stew on your first visit," commented a voice with a New York accent near her. Emily turned to discover a man in his 30s with a warm smile. "How do you know it's my first visit?" "The expression on your face when you read the menu," he replied with a smile. "I'm Gabriel, New York photographer based in Seattle for 5 years. May I join you? I could save you from some culinary surprises, potentially painful ones." There was something simple and honest about his proposal that made Emily nod. Gabriel proved to be pleasant company, telling her about his life as an itinerant photographer, capturing the essence of the Pacific Northwest for East Coast magazines. He knew Seattle like the back of his hand and offered to show her places tourists never discovered. "And you? What brings a New Yorker alone to Seattle?" he finally asked. "I came with my husband," Emily replied, surprised to find herself hesitating over this word. "He's working on a big commercial project." "Ah, the absent husband, a classic in Seattle." Gabriel shook his head. "This city tends to devour East Coast businessmen. They come for a few months and end up staying years, sometimes forgetting why they came in the first place." These words touched a sensitive spot. "He won't forget," she defended, more to convince herself. Gabriel observed her with a quiet insight. "I hope you're right. In the meantime, if you want to discover the real Seattle, here's my number." He scribbled on a napkin. "In all friendship, of course. It would be a shame for you to miss out on the beauty of this place because your husband is too busy to share it with you." Emily returned late that evening, finding Michael asleep on the couch, documents scattered around him. She contemplated him for a moment, noting the new lines of fatigue on his face. She organized the papers and placed a blanket over him without waking him. The napkin with Gabriel's number remained at the bottom of her bag. She had no intention of calling him, but its very existence represented a troubling possibility, that of a life continuing outside Michael's orbit. The following days brought little change. Michael promised moments together that were invariably postponed or cut short. Emily began exploring the city alone, learning to navigate this new environment, discovering an independence she had never known in New York. A month after their arrival, Michael invited her to a gala, organized by the Seattle, New York Chamber of Commerce. It was their first official outing together in weeks. "I've missed you," he murmured, seeing her in her evening gown, an admiring look running over her silhouette. "I know I haven't been very present." "You've been absent," Emily gently corrected. "There's a difference." He had the grace to appear contrite. "This project is crucial, but that doesn't excuse everything. I promise it will get better." She wanted to believe him. More than anything, she wanted to find the man who had begun to open up to her in the last weeks in New York. The gala took place in a sumptuous hotel overlooking Puget Sound. Emily was introduced to countless associates, partners, and local dignitaries. She played her role perfectly, natural charm and intelligence, conquering even the most reserved Seattle businessman. "Mrs. Davis is a precious asset," commented an important local entrepreneur to Michael. "You should involve her more in your business. Women like her see opportunities that we often miss." Michael seemed surprised by this suggestion. "Emily has no experience in business." "She has something more precious," retorted the man, "an intuitive understanding of people. In business, that's often more useful than 10 years of management school." Later that evening, Michael observed Emily animatedly discussing with a group of designers. He suddenly realized he barely knew this version of her. Confident, adaptable, captivating. She had blossomed in this foreign environment, while he buried himself in work. On the way back in the limousine taking them to their apartment, a thoughtful silence settled between them. "I think I was wrong," Michael finally said. Emily's heart tightened. "About what?" "You. Us." He turned to her, his face partially illuminated by the city lights passing by. "I brought you here thinking you would need me to guide you, but perhaps the opposite is true." This admission, simple but profound, changed something between them. That night, for the first time since their arrival in Seattle, they really talked. Michael told her about his doubts about the project, the cultural obstacles he encountered, his feeling of being overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenge. Emily listened, offering not solutions, but the understanding that the Seattle entrepreneur had identified in her. And in this exchange, a new dimension was added to their relationship, a more balanced partnership where each brought their unique strengths. The next morning, Emily found the napkin with Gabriel's number and threw it away. She had made her choice in New York, and despite the difficulties, she reaffirmed it now in Seattle. Their path wouldn't be easy, but she was beginning to believe it would be worth it. 3 months had passed since their arrival in Seattle. The rainy season was in full swing, transforming the city into a tableau of water and light. Emily had grown accustomed to the rhythm of this vibrant metropolis, finding a balance between her personal life and her growing role in Michael's business. Since the night of the gala, a subtle change had occurred. Michael had begun involving her in certain discussions, valuing her intuition, her understanding of cultural nuances that he sometimes missed. Without formal business training, she brought a fresh perspective that often proved valuable. That morning they were having breakfast on the terrace, taking advantage of a break in the torrential showers. Michael seemed nervous, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "I received a proposal from Mr. Lee," he finally announced. He wants us to create together a line of high-end food products, blending American and Asian traditions. That's wonderful, Emily replied, genuinely happy for him. He wants you to lead the project. The croissant she was holding stopped halfway to her mouth. Me? But I have no management experience. You know American gastronomy better than anyone here. You grew up at the market. You understand products, flavors. Michael suddenly seemed enthusiastic. And more importantly, you have this ability to create bridges between cultures. Mr. Lee was impressed by your ideas during dinner at his home last week. Emily put down her croissant, trying to absorb this unexpected proposal. Leading a project of such magnitude seemed intimidating, almost unreal for the market vendor's daughter she was just a few months ago. "Do you really think I'm capable?" she asked, seeking in his eyes the confirmation she needed. "I think you could accomplish anything," he replied with a conviction that surprised her. "The real question is, do you want to?" This question resonated with her like an echo of a previous conversation. In New York, it was he who had asked if she wanted to come to Seattle. Now he was offering her something even more significant, a chance to define herself outside their relationship, to create something that would belong to her. "Yes," she finally said, surprised by her own assurance, "I want to try." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Emily met with local producers, explored traditional markets, developed product concepts with a team of enthusiastic young Seattle chefs. She discovered unsuspected talents in herself: organization, leadership, business creativity. Michael watched her flourish with a mixture of pride and wonder. There was something beautiful in seeing her gain confidence, in observing this metamorphosis of a shy young woman into a respected businesswoman who lost none of her natural sweetness. One evening, as they dined in a small restaurant atop a building overlooking the bay, Michael took her hand across the table. "Our contract expires in a month," he said softly. Emily's heart skipped a beat. With everything that had happened, she had almost forgotten the terms of their initial arrangement. 1 year of marriage, then each would regain their freedom. But nothing seemed further from their current reality. "Does it matter?" she asked, trying to mask her apprehension. "I think we should renew it," he replied, his eyes seeking hers. "Under new conditions." "Which ones?" Michael pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "With no expiration date." He opened it, revealing not an ostentatious jewel but a simple rose-gold band engraved with interwoven patterns, blending American and Asian symbols. "This isn't a business request this time," he continued, his voice slightly trembling. "It's a personal one. I want our marriage to become real, Emily. Not on paper, but in our hearts." Tears came to her eyes. "Are you sure? Are you ready to take that risk?" "The greatest risk would be losing you," he murmured. "These last few months have taught me that the walls I built weren't protecting me from anything. They were simply preventing me from living." He paused. "I can't promise I'll never be afraid, never doubt. But I can promise to try every day to deserve your love." Emily took the ring, examining it in the candlelight. The interwoven symbols told their story. 2 cultures, 2 lives, 2 hearts, once separate now, inextricably linked. "Yes," she answered simply, sliding the ring onto her finger. But at the very moment this promise sealed their new commitment, an email arrived on Michael's phone, a message that would soon shake the very foundations of this newly established trust. The news fell like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Michael read and reread the email on his phone, his face passing from disbelief to contained anger. Emily, still moved by their moment of intimacy, immediately noticed the change. "What's happening?" she asked, worry coloring her voice. Michael slowly placed his phone on the table. "Catherine is in Seattle." These 4 words were enough to transform their perfect evening into a nightmare. Catherine Wilson, the ghost who had haunted their relationship from the beginning, suddenly took tangible form in their present. "How do you know?" Emily's voice was barely audible. "William Ross," Michael replied, his fingers nervously tapping the table. "She contacted him to get information about our project here. She apparently works for our main Seattle competitor." A heavy silence settled between them. Emily observed Michael, looking for signs of the vulnerable man who had just asked her for an endless commitment. But what she saw was the return of the mask, the fortress in accelerated reconstruction. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. "Meet with her." These 2 words struck her like a slap. Meet with her. Why? To understand what she wants, to protect the project. Michael avoided her gaze. It's purely professional. Emily felt an abyss opening beneath her feet. And us? Our commitment from 5 minutes ago? This has nothing to do with it, he replied tersely, regaining that businessman tone she hadn't heard in months. This is a matter of business, not feelings. With Catherine, it will always be both, Emily retorted, a dull pain spreading in her chest. You can't separate your past with her from your present decisions. Michael rose abruptly. I thought you would understand. This project is crucial, not just for me, but for you now too, for the team you lead. I understand perfectly, she replied, the ring on her finger suddenly seeming to weigh a ton. You're still choosing to let her dictate your actions. After everything we've been through. The trip back to the apartment took place in icy silence. Once home, Michael locked himself in his study while Emily took refuge on the terrace, contemplating the illuminated city that now seemed as foreign as when they arrived. She stared at the ring on her finger, symbol of a promise that had broken almost immediately. Had Michael really changed, or was he doomed to always react out of fear whenever the past resurfaced? The next morning, Emily woke up alone. A message on the pillow informed her that Michael had to leave early for an emergency meeting. Not a word about Catherine, not a word about their dispute. Just a return to functional communication that painfully reminded her of their first days in New York. Nevertheless, she went to the development office of their food project, determined not to let her personal pain affect her team. But throughout the day, one question tormented her. Where was Michael? Was he already meeting with Catherine? Her answer came late in the afternoon, in the form of a photograph anonymously sent to her professional phone. Michael and an elegant black-haired woman seated in an upscale restaurant. They seemed engaged in an intense conversation, their heads close, their hands just inches apart on the table. Emily immediately recognized Catherine from the photograph she had seen in the office in New York. Older but still as magnetic, with that aura of sophisticated confidence that she herself would never possess. The message accompanying the photo was simple. Your husband is returning to old habits. A concerned friend. Her world collapsed. Not so much because of the photo itself, which could have an innocent explanation, but because Michael had told her nothing. He had organized this meeting in secret, despite their dispute, despite his promise the night before. When Michael returned late that evening, he found her packing her bags. What are you doing? He asked, stunned. Without a word, Emily showed him the photograph on her phone. Michael's face went from surprise to anger. Are you having me followed? He accused. Of course not, she exclaimed, hurt that he could think that. This photo was sent to my office. Someone wanted me to see it. Michael sat down heavily, running his hands over his face. This is exactly what she wants. To divide us. Create mistrust. It's not her who created this mistrust, Michael. It's you by hiding this meeting from me. I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. Protect me? Or protect yourself? Emily stopped folding her clothes, looking him straight in the eyes. You asked me yesterday to be your wife for real, not just on paper. But at the first test you return exactly to the same behaviors. Michael stood up, approaching her. It's not what you think. Catherine offered to sell us information about our competitor. I was trying to understand her game. And you couldn't tell me this before leaving? You couldn't share this strategy with me? The tears she had been holding back for hours began to flow. How can I believe in us if you don't trust me with the truth? He reached out to her, but she backed away. I need space, she said softly. I've booked a hotel room for a few days. Emily, please. His voice betrayed a panic she had never heard from him. Don't leave like this. I'm not leaving for good, she clarified, wiping away her tears. But I need to think away from you, away from your influence, to know if what we're building is real or just another form of contract. That night, alone in an anonymous hotel room overlooking Seattle Bay, Emily contemplated the ring she hadn't removed despite everything. Doubt infiltrated her like the rain infiltrated the earth, deeply, inexorably. Had she been naive to believe a man so deeply wounded could really change? Or, more troubling still, was it she who had changed, becoming too independent, too demanding for the arrangement they had initially concluded? At the other end of the city, Michael remained motionless on their deserted terrace. staring at the lights of Seattle without seeing them, holding in his hand the phone that had triggered everything. On the screen, a message from Catherine remained unanswered. Just like old times, isn't it? She'll never understand like I do. 3 days passed, during which Emily and Michael maintained strictly professional communication, exchanging emails regarding the project, carefully avoiding any reference to their personal situation. She remained at the hotel, he slept in their empty apartment. Life continued with a strange facade of normalcy. Emily led team meetings, supervised the development of the first product prototypes. Michael negotiated with investors, managed the legal aspects of their expansion, like two actors playing perfectly mastered roles, hiding the emotional chaos consuming them. On the 4th day, as Emily was returning from a visit to a local tea producer, she found an envelope slipped under her hotel room door. Inside, a USB drive with no explanatory note. Her curiosity won over her mistrust. She plugged the drive into her laptop. What she discovered left her speechless. Audio recordings of conversations between Catherine and what appeared to be her current employer, Michael's competitor. Discussions about strategies to sabotage their project, use confidential information, and more troubling still, exploit the flaws in Emily and Michael's relationship. "He's still vulnerable when it comes to trust," Catherine's voice said on one of the recordings, "and she's too inexperienced to see through our game. If we separate them, the project will collapse on its own." Emily remained frozen, assimilating the scope of what she was hearing. This wasn't simply industrial espionage, it was a calculated personal attack, using their history and vulnerabilities against them. A knock on the door made her jump. Opening it, she discovered Mr. Lee, their Seattle partner, looking grave. "Mrs. Davis, forgive this intrusion, but we need to talk," he said, his precise English tinged with a Chinese accent. "It's about your husband and this woman, Catherine Wilson." She invited him in, still shaken by what she had just discovered. "Are you the one who sent me the USB drive?" Mr. Lee nodded. "My security services monitor all our competitors. When we learned of Mrs. Wilson's arrival in Seattle, we understood her objective was to harm our partnership. Why show this to me? Why not directly to Michael?" The old man looked at her with quiet wisdom. "Because you are the true pillar of this project now, Mrs. Davis, and because your husband is blinded, not by persistent feelings for this woman, as you might fear, but by his determination to defeat her alone." This perspective had not occurred to Emily. "You think he's trying to trap her?" "I know it. He came to see me the day after their meeting, explaining his plan. He wanted to gain her trust, make her believe he was tempted to reconnect with her, to lead her to reveal the true intentions of her employers." Mr. Lee sighed. "A risky plan, especially for your relationship. Why didn't he tell me anything?" The pain in her voice was palpable. "He believed he was protecting you, a mistake we men often make." He smiled gently. "He also feared you wouldn't approve of his methods." Emily recalled their many conversations about ethics in business, about lines she refused to cross even for success. Had Michael thought she would disapprove of his strategy to the point of sabotaging it? "What do you expect from me now?" she asked. "Nothing you don't wish to do," Mr. Lee replied. "I'm simply providing you with the information you deserve to have. The rest depends on you." After Mr. Lee's departure, Emily sat for a long time on the edge of her bed, turning her engagement ring over and over. Michael had acted alone, believing he was protecting her, but deeply hurting her in the process. Part of her wanted to be furious with him for this lack of trust, but another part understood his motivations, recognized the path he had traveled since they met. The real problem wasn't Catherine, or even Michael's secret. It was the broken communication between them, this persistent tendency to face crises separately rather than together. That night, Emily made a decision. She left the hotel and went to their apartment. Entering, she found Michael asleep on the couch, documents scattered around him, his face marked by exhaustion. She sat down softly beside him, brushing his cheek with her fingertips. He awoke with a start, his eyes widening, seeing her. "Emily? Why didn't you tell me you were trying to trap Catherine?" she asked directly without preamble. Michael sat up, running a hand through his tousled hair. "How did you find out?" "Mr. Lee came to see me. He explained everything, had me listen to recordings." A long silence settled between them. Michael seemed to be searching for words, torn between relief and apprehension. "I wanted to tell you," he finally admitted, "but I feared your reaction. You have such clear principles, Emily. I was afraid you would refuse to participate in this kind of stratagem, or worse, that you would lose the respect you have for me. So you preferred to risk our relationship rather than face my disapproval." Her voice was soft but firm. "Don't you see the irony? You're repeating exactly what you reproach Catherine for, manipulating people, concealing your true intentions." These words seemed to strike him like a revelation. "I hadn't seen things from that angle," he murmured, horror painting his face. "My God, Emily, I've become what I despise most." She took his hands in hers. "No, you made a mistake, but with good intentions. The difference is that you're capable of recognizing it." Michael looked at her with a new intensity. "I'm sorry, so very sorry. I promised you I would be honest, try every day, and at the first difficulty—" "We're both learning," she interrupted. "I made mistakes too. I should have talked to you instead of leaving." They remained like this, hands linked, mutually recognizing their errors, their fears, their incomplete progress. This conversation didn't erase the pain of the previous days, but opened a path toward healing. "What are we going to do about Catherine?" Emily finally asked. An unexpected smile appeared on Michael's face. "I have an idea, but this time I want us to develop it together, as partners." "Equals?" For the first time since their dispute, Emily felt hope reborn. They still had a long road ahead, habits to change, trust to rebuild. But now they faced adversity side by side, no longer separated by their fears, but united by their common determination. The rainy season was coming to an end, giving way to a clear blue sky that hovered over Seattle like a renewed promise. Emily stood at the edge of the pool on the roof of their building, contemplating the city awakening in the golden morning light. A week had passed since her conversation with Michael, a week of cautious reconciliation, of mutual rediscovery. Their plan regarding Catherine was in motion, a strategy developed together, combining Michael's experience and Emily's intuition. Rather than confronting her directly, they had decided to turn her own methods against her, making her believe they were working on a different project than the one they were actually developing. An elegant way to neutralize her without stooping to her tactics. But beyond this potential professional victory, Emily wondered about their personal future. The initial contract had expired the day before, exactly 1 year after their wedding at the plaza. They hadn't explicitly discussed it, as if this date had lost its importance in light of recent events. Yet she couldn't help but wonder, what were they to each other now? A real couple? Business partners with emotional benefits? Or something still undefined? The sound of footsteps behind her interrupted her reflections. Michael was approaching, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He handed her one, leaning against the railing beside her. "You're up early," he observed softly. "I was thinking," she replied, blowing on her hot coffee. "About what?" "Us. Yesterday." She turned to him. "It was the official end of our contract." Michael nodded slowly. "I know. And yet, we're still here." "We're still here," he confirmed, his gaze lost in the horizon. "I sometimes wonder if all this was written in advance, if despite all my efforts to control every aspect of my life, the universe had other plans." Emily smiled at this thought. "The market vendor always told me that destiny is like a river. You can swim against the current for a while, but it always leads you where you need to go." A comfortable silence settled between them, each lost in their thoughts. The sun gradually rose, illuminating the skyscrapers with copper reflections. "I received a proposal from New York," Michael suddenly said. "They want me to return to run the European headquarters." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Do you want to go back?" "Not without you." He looked her directly in the eyes. "But the question is, do you want to go back? You've built something important here, with the team, with the project." This question caught her off guard. For the first time, Michael placed her professional aspirations at the same level as his own. "I could continue remotely," she thought aloud. "Or we could stay here." Michael seemed surprised. "Would you be ready to stay in Seattle?" "I'm ready to be where we can build our future together," she replied simply. "New York, Seattle, or elsewhere. The place matters less than the person I share it with." He set down his cup, taking her hands in his. "You know what's strange? A year ago I married a stranger for practical reasons. Today I can't imagine my life without you, and the reasons have nothing practical about them anymore. These words warmed Emily more than the tropical sun. Is that your way of saying you love me? She gently teased. In response, Michael pulled her to him, kissing her with a tenderness that conveyed everything words couldn't express. When they separated, he murmured against her lips, "I've loved you since that night you brought me orange blossom tea in the library. I just took too long to admit it, even to myself." This confession, simple but profound, marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. The contract had expired, but something more authentic, more lasting took its place. Later that day, they learned that Catherine had hastily left Seattle, their plan having worked better than they had hoped. Mr. Lee invited them to dinner to celebrate, proposing a new partnership that would extend to the East Coast if Michael accepted the position in New York. "We need a strong presence there," the old man explained, "and a creative team here. You could direct both sides of the operation together." Returning from dinner, walking hand in hand along the illuminated waterfront, Emily and Michael discussed this new perspective, exchanging ideas, planning their common future. For the first time, they truly spoke as equal partners, each valuing the other's vision. Arriving at their apartment, they settled on the terrace, contemplating the stars, faintly twinkling through the light pollution of the metropolis. "You know what strikes me?" said Emily, nestled against Michael. "A year ago I felt like a piece moved on a chessboard. Today I feel like the architect of my own life." Michael gently stroked her hair. "You always were. You just needed time to discover it, and I needed you to remind me that controlling isn't living." In this moment of shared peace, Emily's last doubts vanished. It didn't matter where they would go next, New York, Seattle, or somewhere yet unknown. The essential thing was that they had finally found the path to each other, no longer bound by a contract, but by a choice renewed each day. The true journey hadn't been geographical, but emotional. A journey from shadows to light, from mistrust to trust, from solitude to the communion of two souls that, against all odds, had recognized themselves as complementary. New York seemed both familiar and foreign to Emily when they returned 2 months later. The same streets, the same monuments, but seen through eyes transformed by experience. The young girl from Chelsea Market had given way to a confident woman who now directed the creative branch of an international company. Their return had been cleverly orchestrated. Michael would take over direction of the East Coast headquarters, while Emily would continue to supervise product development, dividing her time between New York and Seattle. An arrangement that respected their respective ambitions while preserving their union. That morning, Emily was preparing for her first visit to Chelsea Market since their return. She had deliberately avoided warning her father, wanting to surprise him. Michael, already in a suit for a meeting with investors, observed her from the threshold of their bedroom. "Nervous?" he asked, noticing how she changed outfits for the 3rd time. "A little," she admitted, finally opting for a simple summer dress. "It's strange to come back as someone else." "You're not someone else," Michael gently corrected. "You're still Emily. You've simply discovered facets of yourself you didn't know about." She smiled, grateful for this perspective. "Do you want to come with me?" "I would have liked to, but this meeting—" He seemed genuinely disappointed. "Join me for lunch afterward? I'd like to know your father's reaction." Emily nodded, appreciating his consideration. A year earlier, he would have simply considered his meeting a priority without explanation or regret. These small changes, daily but significant, constantly reminded her of the path they had traveled. Chelsea Market was exactly as she remembered, lively, noisy, fragrant with 1,000 scents. She navigated between the stalls with an ease born of habit, recognizing familiar faces who looked at her with surprise, noting her simple but undeniable elegance, so different from the young girl in an apron they knew. Her father's stall was in the same place, but something had changed. It was larger, better arranged, with a new painted sign, Parker and Helen's Herbs and Spices, and there, carefully arranging bunches of thyme and rosemary, was her father alongside a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile. "Dad," Emily called softly. Mr. Parker froze, then slowly turned. His eyes widened as he recognized his daughter, and without a word, he came around the stall to embrace her. "My Emily," he murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. "You've come back." The embrace lingered, bridging a year of absence, of changes, of separate growth. When they finally parted, Mr. Parker held her at arm's length, examining her with pride. "Look at you," he said, tears in his eyes. "You're radiant." The woman had approached, waiting politely. Mr. Parker turned to her with a tender smile. "Emily, this is Helen, my wife of 3 months." "Your wife?" Emily couldn't hide her surprise. "Life holds surprises at any age," he replied with a wink. Helen stepped forward, warmly clasping Emily's hands. "Your father talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you." The following hours were devoted to reunions, shared stories, new intertwined lives. Emily learned how her father and Helen had grown closer after her departure, how they had merged their businesses, how they had transformed adversity into opportunity. "And you and Michael?" finally asked Mr. Parker. "The contract is over, isn't it?" Emily smiled, unconsciously turning her ring. "Yes, but we decided to stay together. By choice this time." Her father nodded, a quiet wisdom in his gaze. "I knew something would happen between you, from the very first day." "How could you have known?" "Because beneath his cold exterior, I saw how he looked at you." Mr. Parker smiled at the memory. He chose you among all the women he could have approached for his arrangement. It wasn't a coincidence. This perspective had never occurred to Emily. Had Michael unconsciously been attracted to her from the beginning? Had destiny really played a role in their meeting? When she joined Michael for lunch, she reported the conversation with her father, including this surprising theory. "Your father is more insightful than I thought," Michael admitted, an enigmatic smile on his lips. "What does that mean?" pressed Emily, intrigued. Michael took a sip of wine before answering. "I didn't choose a wife at random, Emily. I spent weeks observing different potential candidates, all suitable for my plan. And you chose me because unlike all the others, you never seemed impressed by wealth or power." He smiled at the memory. "You treated every market customer with the same kindness, whether they were buying $2 worth of herbs or $100 worth of saffron. I found that refreshing." This revelation added a new dimension to their story, suggesting that even in his most calculating moments, Michael had been guided by a deeper appreciation than he wanted to admit. "So, my father is right," Emily concluded. "It wasn't just a business contract, even at the beginning." "Perhaps not," Michael conceded, "but let's not give him too much credit. I'm still a formidable businessman." She laughed, appreciating this rare moment of self-deprecation. "The most formidable I know." In the afternoon, they visited their former New York home, now transformed into a main office for their East Coast operations. Walking through the reconfigured rooms, Emily stopped in front of Catherine's former office, now converted into a bright conference room. "Any regrets?" she asked, observing Michael's reaction. "None," he firmly replied. "The past has its place, but it's not here." This simple but powerful response symbolized their new common philosophy, honoring what had been without letting it dictate what would be. Together, they were creating a present that fully belonged to them, built on conscious choices rather than reactions to the past. Later, as they dined on the terrace of their new apartment overlooking the Hudson River, Michael handed her an envelope. "What is this?" she asked, curious. "Our next chapter, if you wish." Inside, she found plans for a house in Napa Valley, a magnificent property surrounded by lavender fields, with space for an herb garden and a professional kitchen to develop her recipes. "It would be our refuge," Michael explained, "a place halfway between New York and Seattle, where we could reconnect, create, simply be ourselves without the pressures of daily life." Emily contemplated the plans, moved by this vision of a shared future. "It's perfect," she murmured. Under the starry New York sky, they sealed this new promise with a kiss that spoke of future, restored trust, and that unexpected love that had transformed a simple business contract into the adventure of a lifetime. New York spring displayed its charms, adorning Central Park with vibrant colors and softening the air with intoxicating scents. 6 months had passed since their return to the East Coast, 6 months of adaptation, of balance found between their professional ambitions and their personal life. The house in Napa Valley was now their haven of peace, where they spent every possible weekend away from the capital's tumult. There, Emily experimented with new recipes for their line of food products, while Michael rediscovered the simple pleasure of cultivating the earth, creating a garden that mixed American flowers and exotic plants brought back from Seattle. That morning, however, they were in New York for a crucial event, the official launch of their Fusion collection, fruit of their collaboration with Mr. Lee. A range of products combining American and Asian culinary traditions, developed under Emily's creative direction. In their New York apartment, the atmosphere was electric. Michael adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, while Emily finalized the last details of her presentation. "Nervous?" he asked, seeing her reread her notes for the 10th time. "A little," she admitted. "Here's the first time I'm publicly presenting myself as creative director." Michael approached her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "You'll be brilliant. These products bear your imprint in every detail. No one could present them better than you." She smiled, grateful for his support. "'Tis strange to think that a little over a year ago, I was weighing saffron at the market. And today you're revolutionizing the way the world perceives American spices." He gently kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you, Emily. More than you can imagine." These words, simple but sincere, were worth all the encouragement in the world. The Emily of before would have doubted, would have devalued herself. Today's Emily accepted the compliment with grace, aware of her worth without arrogance. The launch event took place in a prestigious hotel near Times Square. The room was filled with journalists, food critics, investors, and renowned chefs. Emily, in an elegant lavender dress, stood backstage, watching Michael open the ceremony with quiet confidence. "A year ago," he began, "I would have presented this project as mine. Today I am honored to simply introduce the true visionary behind this culinary revolution, my wife and partner, Emily Davis." Applause accompanied her to the podium. Taking her place at the microphone, Emily swept her gaze over the prestigious assembly. In the front row she glimpsed her father and Helen, who had come especially for the occasion. Further back, Mr. Lee and a Seattle delegation, and next to them William Ross, whose discreet support had been precious in difficult moments. She began her presentation with an anecdote about her childhood at the market, immediately establishing an emotional connection with the audience. Then she explained the philosophy behind fusion, not a simple juxtaposition of flavors, but a true culinary conversation between two cultures, respecting traditions while creating something new. The enthusiasm was palpable in the room. Samples circulated, eliciting approving murmurs and frantic notes from critics. Emily answered questions with an ease that surprised even Michael, precise without being technical, passionate without being excessive. Everything seemed perfect until a familiar voice rose from the back of the room. "A question, Mrs. Davis?" A shiver ran down Emily's spine as she recognized Catherine Wilson, elegant and impeccable in a black suit, a calculating smile on her lips. Silence fell brutally on the assembly, all aware of the sudden tension. Michael made a move to intervene, but Emily stopped him with a slight gesture. This was her moment, her project, and she would face this confrontation herself. "Of course, Ms. Wilson," she calmly replied. "I'm listening." Catherine stepped forward slightly. "These concepts are certainly charming, but don't you fear that your lack of formal experience in gastronomy limits your credibility in this highly competitive market?" The question, politely formulated but designed to sow doubt, created a palpable discomfort. Emily felt the gaze of hundreds of people on her, awaiting her reaction. A year earlier, she might have stammered, almost apologized for her presence, but today's Emily smiled with quiet confidence. "It's precisely my unconventional path that constitutes our strength, Ms. Wilson," she responded in a clear voice. "I wasn't trained to follow established rules, but to listen, observe, and create. Our fusion line doesn't seek to imitate the existing, but to propose a new culinary conversation." She paused, then added, "Besides, true innovation rarely comes from those who follow the marked path, but from those who dare to trace their own. Wouldn't you agree?" An approving murmur crossed the assembly, followed by spontaneous applause. Catherine's face slightly tensed, her plan having visibly failed. Without another word, she left the room, leaving behind a stronger Emily than ever. The rest of the event was an undeniable triumph. Orders flowed in, exceeding all projections. Food critics promised glowing articles. Mr. Lee, radiating pride, immediately proposed extending their partnership to other Asian markets. Later that evening, at the reception that followed, Michael found Emily on an isolated terrace, taking a moment of calm after the day's intensity. "You were extraordinary," he said, joining her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "The way you handled Catherine, I couldn't have done better." Emily accepted the glass with a smile. "I learned from the best negotiator I know." "No," Michael gently corrected. "You always had this strength in you. You just needed to discover it yourself." They contemplated together the lights of New York progressively illuminating in the twilight. "You know," Emily said after a moment, "when I accepted your contract over a year ago, I thought I was sacrificing part of my freedom. I didn't realize I would actually discover a greater freedom than anything I had known." Michael looked at her with curiosity. "How so?" "The freedom to discover myself, to explore talents I didn't know I possessed, to build something that transcends me." She turned to him, eyes shining. "Our marriage began as a golden cage, but it transformed into a springboard to a world of possibilities." Michael was touched by this perspective he had never considered. "And to think I thought I was offering you a temporary escape from your father's difficulties. In the end, it was you who offered me an escape from my own interior prison." They toasted this shared realization, this wonderful paradox that had transformed a cold contract into the warmest of alliances. Night had fallen on New York, but for Emily and Michael a new dawn was rising, that of a future they had chosen together, forged through trials and illuminated by a mutual trust that neither would have believed possible a year earlier. Autumn clothed Napa Valley in amber and copper colors, transforming the fields of dried lavender into undulating seas of purplish hues. Emily and Michael's house, nestled between vineyards and olive groves, had gradually transformed into a true home, each room reflecting their shared history, memories from New York, treasures brought back from Seattle, local artisanal creations. A year had passed since the triumphant launch of Fusion, now a reference in the international gastronomic world. Success had exceeded their wildest hopes, opening possibilities they would never have imagined. That morning, Emily was active in the vast professional kitchen Michael had installed for her. Freshly picked herbs, dried in suspended bunches, filling the air with intoxicating scents. On the countertop, carefully measured ingredients waited to be transformed into new creations. "Working on a Sunday morning?" asked Michael, entering the kitchen after his morning walk through their fields. "It's not really work," she replied with a smile. "I'm preparing something special for tonight." Michael approached, appreciatively sniffing the spice blends. "Our anniversary." 2 years, confirmed Emily, her eyes brightening at the thought. "Who would have believed it?" He embraced her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Certainly not me when I proposed that absurd contract to you." "The best contract I ever signed," she joked, turning to kiss him lightly. Their day unfolded in luxurious tranquility, shared reading on the terrace, a light lunch in the shade of olive trees, preparations for the special dinner Emily was cooking. It was a ritual they had established. Each Sunday belonged exclusively to them, without work, without professional calls, just the pleasure of each other's presence. In the late afternoon, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Michael suggested a walk to the neighboring hill. Emily accepted enthusiastically, donning a light shawl against the autumn coolness. The path wound through their lands, passing by the herb garden Emily had methodically developed. Each section represented a different region. Traditional California herbs, carefully acclimatized Asian spices, experimental varieties resulting from their joint research. "Do you remember our first dinner together in New York?" asked Michael as they climbed the hill. "You were so nervous you spilled your water glass." Emily laughed at the memory. "And you were so formal, as if we were signing an international treaty rather than sharing a meal." "I was terrified," admitted Michael, surprising her. "You? Terrified?" "Completely." He smiled, nostalgic. "I remember thinking I was making a terrible mistake, that I could never maintain this cold facade in your presence. You were too luminous." This touching confession made Emily smile. "We've come a long way since then. The most beautiful journey." They reached the hilltop just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink. From there, they could embrace with their gaze their lands, their home, and in the distance, the small California village that had welcomed them with benevolent curiosity. Michael pulled an envelope from his pocket, handing it to Emily. "To mark these 2 years." Intrigued, she opened it to discover a notarized deed. "What is this?" "Chelsea Market," explained Michael. "I bought the entire building." Emily looked at him, astonished. "You bought the market? But why?" "Not to transform it," he quickly reassured her. "On the contrary, to preserve it. Real estate investors were circling, talking about converting it into a high-end commercial gallery. I thought you'd want to protect it." Emotion overwhelmed Emily. This gesture represented much more than a simple anniversary gift. It was a recognition of her roots, an honor paid to her past, proof that Michael understood the importance of preserving what had formed her. "How did you know?" she murmured, moved to tears. "Your father mentioned it during our last dinner. He was worried about the future of the market." Michael gently caressed her cheek. "I thought we could make it a foundation, ensure reasonable rents for vendors, keep this tradition alive." Emily threw herself into his arms, overwhelmed by gratitude and love. "It's the most beautiful gift you could give me." They remained embraced, contemplating the landscape blazing in the sunset light. In this moment of perfect communion, Emily realized how much their relationship had evolved, from mistrust to absolute trust, from calculation to selfless generosity, from contract to sincere commitment. "I have something for you too," she said softly, pulling away slightly. From her dress pocket she extracted a small carved wooden box. Inside, Michael discovered not an object, but an ultrasound photograph. He looked at it, breath taken away, incomprehension slowly transforming into wonder. "You're—" His voice broke with emotion. Emily nodded, a mixture of joy and apprehension in her eyes. 3 months. I confirmed it yesterday." Michael fell to his knees before her, embracing her waist, resting his head against her belly with a reverence that transcended words. When he raised his eyes to her, they shone with tears. "I spent so many years believing I didn't deserve this happiness," he murmured. "Building walls, protecting myself from pain, and you simply—" He searched for words. "You loved the man behind the walls until they crumbled on their own." Emily knelt before him, taking his face in her hands. "We all deserve to be loved, Michael. All of us. Without exception." As the sun disappeared over the horizon, they remained thus forehead to forehead, sharing this silent promise of a new chapter, perhaps the most beautiful of their improbable story. A story that had begun with a cold and calculated contract, but that had transformed into the most authentic of love stories. The golden light of the June sun filtered through the muslin curtains, illuminating the room with an almost ethereal glow. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, contemplating the small olive wood cradle where their 2-month-old daughter Olivia peacefully slept. 3 years had passed since that day when Michael had proposed that strange contract in the back room of Chelsea Market. 3 years that had transformed the shy market vendor's daughter into an accomplished woman, and the businessman with the armored heart into a loving husband, and now an amazed father. The door softly opened, and Michael entered carrying a tray with orange blossom tea, their morning ritual, a tribute to that moment in the New York library that had marked the true beginning of their story. "Is she still sleeping?" he murmured, setting down the tray. Emily nodded, accepting the cup he handed her. "Like an angel. She has your eyes, you know. And your smile, fortunately," he joked, sitting beside her to contemplate their little wonder. Life had organized itself into a harmonious balance they would never have believed possible. Their business was thriving. The Fusion line had extended across America and Asia. Emily now directed a foundation dedicated to preserving traditional markets, and Michael had reoriented his entrepreneurial vision toward more ethical and sustainable projects. But more importantly, they had found that inner peace which had been so lacking in both of them. He learning to trust again, she discovering her own strength. "I received news from Seattle," Michael said after a moment. "Mr. Lee is retiring. He invites us to the ceremony next month." "I'd like to go," Emily replied. "Olivia is old enough to travel now, and Seattle holds a special place in our story." Michael gently caressed her back. "That's where we truly chose to be together. Beyond the contract." "Beyond everything," she softly corrected. A slight gurgle drew their attention to the cradle. Olivia was waking, her little hands waving in the air. Emily took her gently in her arms, still marveling at this small life they had created together. "Good morning, treasure," she murmured, as Michael leaned to kiss his daughter's forehead. They descended together into the garden, settling under the pergola, covered with flowering wisteria. It was Saturday, And as every weekend, the house would soon come alive. Mr. Parker and Helen would come for lunch, bringing fresh produce from the market. William Ross might stop by, as he often did during his travels between Chicago and Los Angeles. Their home had become what Michael would never have imagined he could recreate, a place of warmth, of welcome, of authentic connections, far from the empty fortress his New York residence had been. "What are you thinking about?" asked Emily, noticing his thoughtful expression as he contemplated their property. "I was thinking about the first time I saw you at the market," he replied. "You were arranging California herbs, and there was this particular light that seemed to surround you. I felt something I couldn't name. And now I know." He took her free hand, the other still holding Olivia. It was the beginning of healing, the first ray of sunshine after an endless winter. Emily smiled, touched by this confession. "You know what my father always said? That certain herbs only reveal their true fragrance when they're a little bruised by life. I think that's true for people too." Michael meditated on this simple but profound wisdom. He was right. We both needed to be a little bruised to release our true essence. Olivia gurgled as if to approve, provoking their tender laughter. This innocent sound symbolized everything they had built together: hope, continuity, love without conditions or deadlines. Later in the day, as their home came alive with shared conversations and laughter, Michael took Emily aside into their study. He pulled a document from his drawer, their original marriage contract, the one that stipulated a 1-year duration. "I thought it was time to get rid of it definitively," he said, holding the paper over a wastebasket. Emily placed her hand on his, stopping him. "No," she said softly, "let's keep it." Michael looked at her with surprise. "Why keep this reminder of such a cold arrangement?" "Because it's the beginning of our story," she explained, "however imperfect it may be, and because it reminds me that sometimes the most beautiful destinations are the ones we hadn't planned." He considered her perspective, then nodded with an understanding smile. Together they placed the contract in a box which they set on a shelf, not as an object to be venerated, but as a testimony to the path traveled. When they rejoined their guests in the garden, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, bathing the scene in a golden light that seemed to bless this tableau of simple but profound happiness. Mr. Parker was telling market stories to William, Helen was arranging fresh flowers, and Olivia, passing from arm to arm, received the love of this family built not by blood, but by choices. Emily observed this scene with quiet gratitude, feeling Michael's hand gently squeeze hers. They didn't need words to communicate what they felt, this shared certainty that despite all the detours, all the wounds, all the doubts, they had finally found their path to each other. And in this golden light of the California evening, surrounded by those they loved, Emily and Michael finally understood this fundamental truth. True love is not a fixed-term contract, but a commitment renewed each day, each hour, each moment, an endless journey where each shared step is a destination in itself. In the contracts of the heart, the smallest print often reveals the greatest truths, that true love knows neither conditions nor deadlines, only the silent promise to grow together through all the seasons of life.